right, thank you all for coming out and not going to see Peter Molyneux. That was your other option. You made the right choice. So who am I? This is my speaker introduction. My name is Erik Marcisak. I fell down the Grand Canyon. That's photographic proof. I studied screenwriting at School of Visual Arts in New York, and I worked as a script reader for 5 years in New York with film production companies. I then moved on to 7 years of writing, directing, producing, performing improv and sketch comedy in New York. 3 of my former close collaborators write for The Daily Show, including the head writer. I'm an expert at name dropping. But why I'm here is because of 8 years as a narrative designer, writer, game designer for various companies. Currently, I'm at Eidos, Montreal. So this lecture, it's going to be about 2 things. It's going to be about then, which is 2006 to 2010 to me, and now, 2012 to 14. So my career is split into two segments, pretty much. It's mobile games, which is something that I did where I worked with Longtail Studios, and we worked on dating games, time management games for tweens, a wrestling RPG, and a zombie tower defense kind of games. And now my career is in AAA games, and I work on these 2 things. So I worked on one, and I am now working on the other. So this lecture, the legal department says I can say nothing about this. Mobile games, it happened a long time ago. It might be lies. That's what I said. So let's travel to 2006. This is where I got my start in the video game industry. You did not have a Facebook account. YouTube just started slowing down productivity in the office. And the iPhone was a rumor. The iPhone came out in 2009, if I'm correct. But it was a rumor for many years. Longtail Studios, where I was working at, we made games with character. That was our company motto. And for mobile devices in 2006. So this included old flip phones like Nokia phones, DS, and eventually it was iPhone once that came around. At our peak, we had 10 staff writers. I was the only college dropout. Just remember that. So here are some lessons that I have from working from the mobile games that I am also now applying to my work in AAA. One of the things we work on was audience research. Now, mobile games for Best Friends Tonight, which was a DS game, time management game for the tween audience, we looked at high-quality things that were targeted at that audience that we really liked, Avatar: The Last Airbender. We looked at what they were actually buying and really falling in love with at the time and watched all of them, including the sequels. But we also did some more analytical stuff where it was, this is a great book, just James Cameron used it before he was writing Titanic. It was just something to give you a little bit more of an insight to the audience. So for AAA, for Hitman, I did a little bit different kind of research. Because we were trying to aim for something that was very realistic for what if you were a hitman. That Hitman project is currently being worked on in I.O., and as I said, I can say nothing. But I read James Bond books. I read this great autobiography about a Mexican assassin, which is fascinating and scary because it's real as much as a autobiography can be. And Trickster makes this world because the character of Agent 47 was a deception master. Basically, it's a great book for anybody who reads books about, tricksters or wants to write about tricksters as their character. Audience research number 2. In mobile games, we actually did a lot of stuff into the emotional existential issues facing the audience there. It was pretty ahead of its time at Longtail. In AAA, I think there is, right now, it's evolving. We are doing more focus groups. We are looking at analytics and listening to the community that likes stuff. But the takeaway that I have is the more narrow your audience, the more knowledgeable you have to be about them and what they like, what they don't like. Because the audience evolves faster than the creator. And that's something that I've kind of kept in my mind, because you've always got to keep going, looking. Player character with TNA Wrestling, which was a game, the player's progression was going from a newbie to an expert in the gameplay. And in the story, that also mirrored that kind of thing, going from a no-name to someone famous. In AAA, I can't really talk about it, but I'll just put a what if there. Basically, Hitman starts as an expert. It's not like he's going to stumble on some crystal and he's going to have superpowers where he can kill anybody he looks at. It'd be a very interesting kind of game if that was the way it was. But we started from a place where we could be a newbie to maybe an audience that's never picked up a game before like that, but it has to be an expert. And we looked at things much smaller, where it's the contract was something that the character went from being an underdog to a success. So story structure. In mobile games, we started out in the film thing. We were all film students. We looked at these plot graphs and read all the books that all have the things. There's been plenty of discussion, including Tom's discussion about it. I'm not going to go into it. I will just point out that out of all the talks at the GDC Narrative Summit, this talk is right around the second act low point. If you were to line it up on the plot graph, we are past the midpoint, and we are somewhere around there. So that's where you are if you have sat through all of these, Tom. But when we started off, we were really looking at film structure, and Star Wars is the thing that everybody references. But I think by the end of the mobile game era that I was working in, we were really looking at Veronica Mars because of the episodic structure that was going on there. And in AAA games, I can say nothing. But I will recommend this book. This is an awesome book. If you have not read it and you want to know about TV seasons and structures and what went into the making of shows that are ones that you would call right now the most game-changing TV shows there, this is a book just filled with the origin stories and how much was planned, how much went into it. Fascinating book. Really gives you a behind the scenes. Some of these shows, they only planned just the first season. For Lost, they only planned the characters. That's it. Just to see what happens. So anyway, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's a great book. And play story-focused games. So, sorry I timed this break. All right, so stories and levels. In mobile games, for the wrestling RPG that I worked on, it was basically a wrestling RPG that was in the vein of Knights of the Old Republic, where the player could go in as a wrestler, choose if they want to be a good guy or a bad guy, and make decisions all along the way to make dramatic kind of things, the way that a wrestler basically goes through their, storylines. So that document for the full version of the game was 26 pages, 12,000 words, had all the branching and everything in there. We had to make a 100K version of the game, which is for the cheapest phones possibly made. 100K, that's it. So the outline was 10 sentences. Our scenes were 1 to 5 sentences, and trying to distill something like from that big behemoth of possibilities down to something simple was an exercise. And we really kind of really leaned on the Hemingway 6-word story thing. For those of you who don't know, I don't know if it's true or false, but Hemingway was credited with this: the shortest, saddest story in the world. And that was something that we put on the restriction with us, was to get it down to 6 words or less. Much like I was the only college dropout and I fell down the Grand Canyon. Those were 6 words, but it gives you something to think about the character of me. So AAA, look at that, I can't say anything. But I will just show you this picture of a guy. Some of you know him, some of you don't. And I will give you 6 words. He's a dictator. He's guilty of genocide. He's on vacation. Can you imagine what kind of mission that would be? It's in 6 words. I just want to say for the record, that guy is not in the game. He is a real person. He is a horrible person in Syria. But this is just something as an example that I wanted to share with you, that 6 words can inspire the person who's reading it to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So this section of the talk, leaning on that, really was about this breakdown between 2 types of things and having this Twitter, quickly understood, shareable kind of thing that you could talk to your friend about verbally, or you could tweet very fast and really trying to get things concise. But then at the same time, the fans that want that game in AAA, they really want the depth there. And you also need that depth for when you're making it in mobile. But this was really, this slide is not mobile and AAA. It's just thinking about it back and forth, going from really small to really big is something that I did in mobile games and I'm still doing today in AAA. So character bio. This is what we did for mobile games. We were very focused with the writing staff and very centered on character. So this was just even for any character. This wasn't just the player character. This was any NPC that they worked with, was this whole list of little things just to get you to really understand what their arc was throughout the whole game, what their backstory was, what the relationship, what kind of issues they had. And I'll get into tone and diction later, but I just wanted to show you that this is how focused we were on character and stuff like that. We didn't, I think Longtail was very ahead of its time, but it just didn't line up correctly with the boom of mobile games that we did. So I don't know why I just insulted my past employer. I didn't insult them, I guess. Okay. AAA. Oh, look at that. Can't say anything. But sometimes I like to scare the legal department. That's what I just said. So this is what I was working on, the level of template for Hitman. The beginning part on the left is pretty much a snapshot. There'd be a photo, here's 6 words to describe them, profession, and all these little things that the player can quickly read that information. But if somebody wants to go into more depth, they can go into the stuff that's on the right side and on the bottom half of the left side. All of this stuff I basically got from law enforcement, Interpol, FBI, and it's all the depth that what actually goes into trying to track down somebody and trying to put out that information and trying to find some criminal that they can't find. So yeah, it's pretty lengthy. If I get an email from legal saying I can't have it in my presentation, it won't be there. If you want, take a picture of it now. Or not. Boop, you missed it. Character, tone, and diction. This was something very specific that we worked on. Oops, sorry. For characters, just so that they sounded different. Because when we worked with, we had a small amount of characters, and we had 4 writers working on just a DS game. We wanted to make sure each character sounded different. So we broke it down to these 5 little things. Accent and dialect, common phrases, verbal quirks, topics they like to talk about, topics they hate to talk about, and then the reaction to a touchstone event. I'm doing the same thing. I was doing the same thing for Hitman. I just think it's a neat little 5, here you go, this is what they sound like, so that you can hand off to another writer if you have a team or whatever, so that they know where to go with that character and so they sound distinct. Or that your other writer could define it. But it's just a nice little thing there. Dialogue in mobile games, we had a character limit with mobile games, and we came up with new measurements for dialogue. And we called it clicks. And that's a phrase or a sentence or a group of sentences that the player has to get through to move on to the gameplay. So it literally was the old school phone being like click, click, click. How many clicks do they have to go through? Below that, we went to the meat, which is the vital part of the dialogue. That usually was the gameplay stuff. And then we went to the fat, which was usually the writer stuff, who wanted to add more things and describe more things. But these were the terms that we used when we were talking in mobile games, because the dialogue, if you could see on the page there, you got like room for 2 sentences, maybe a text message. Some of you have probably written a text message right now that is longer than the stuff that's there. Of course, I can't say anything, but I still carry on the same things that I do in mobile because I really like streamlining stuff because you get to the core of it, and it's kind of the hardest thing to, I don't know, it was a struggle at first to go from a screenwriting kind of thing to a more precise, get information to the player kind of stuff. So I'll give you a little dialogue exercise to help you go from a screenwriter to a mobile game writer. Write a conversation. You have a limit of 1 page. Rewrite it and do it in half a page. And then rewrite it and make it that. That is kind of the thing. That was the cycle that we had to do. And once you do that enough times, you start looking for the streamlining naturally after you do it. Okay, this is my second break. All right, so I'm going to go into branching. This is story and dialogue. The wrestling game was, like I said, Knights of the Old Republic. It was a thing where you started off from as a nobody, and teamed up with like a wrestler, and that wrestler betrays you, and then you got to get revenge. That's the most condensed version of the story there. AAA, I can't say anything. But in mobile games, that was something that I learned personally, going, again, from screenwriter to game writer. I had to learn on my own and had to play other games and learn that way. So I'm going to give you guys a simple lesson in branching. Now, this could be applied to your dialogue. This could be applied to your story if you want to have branching. I'm going to try to slow down as possible, but I'm trying to keep it as simplified as possible too. So the horizontal is going to be your start and your end. You start somewhere, you end. Just write the story you want to tell, as if it was a movie. This is the thing that's going to happen. This is the straight through. This is how you want to go at it. So now you want branching. You look at the end and you make sure you know it's going to be a branching thing. Now the horizontal, I'm going to put as two emotions here. They could be anything. They could be, I have it happy and sad here. It could be angry and zombie or whatever. Just to have a spectrum, like two opposing kind of emotions there. Those red things I'm representing as bottleneck points. Again, this is not a 3-act structure. This could be just a conversation that somebody's having. And right there, you still have your spine there of what's the player, if they played this on track, like Uncharted or something like that, it's going through all the way to the end. But now go to the end of your game and start building forward. And go from have a path that goes from your bottleneck to your end that is extreme happy. And a path that goes from your, extreme sad, that goes from your bottleneck to your end there. And then put one in between and plan for those. Basically, plan for 5 endings. Just 5 endings. Just don't even think about where you're going. And now start reverse engineering it backwards, as if you were going to take those 5 paths out to the next bottleneck point. Now, over here, you're going to have, let's say, a choice that gives you those 5. Now you have 5 Uncharteds that all hinge on one choice made very early on. Once you have this thing set up, you can move forward by looking what happens. Okay, I'm going to go from extreme sadness to extreme happiness, somewhere in the middle there. And do the opposite, going from extreme happiness to extreme sadness, but also planning along for those points of where things crisscross and where things can cross. And then you're basically following that kind of pattern of looking at, okay, from that point to end at that bottleneck, this is how long that path would go. Same. Now this is also the branching storyline that we did for the wrestling game, was exactly the same thing like this, where there was a touchstone event and different ways, making sure that it makes sense logically at every single crossover point, because the player could go through this. And for that last part, you're doing the same kind of thing, extremes to extremes, 1 degree of change, up, 1 degree down, 2 degrees down, 2 degrees up, 3. Now, it's a bit, I know, I'm sorry, this is abstract and it's crazy, but hopefully you kind of got it. I don't know. But if you are someone who wants a game with branching, whenever I've had to do something with branching, I've always gone to this kind of process of reverse engineering the 5 endings and building out from there. Because I think I tried the other way, and it just kind of, you go all over the place, and it becomes this thing that you can't really control. So that is the end of my talk. I will be in room 3000 if anybody wants me to try to explain that branching slide again to them. But I want to thank every single person I've ever met in my life that led me to this exact moment right now with you. So thanks.